News today, you know the acquisition, Elon Musk, 5420, value of $44 billion to acquire Twitter. Like a Tesla up and down the Pacific Coast Highway, Elon's Twitter takeover has had many twists and turns. Elon now has made that deal, as we mentioned, 5420, to acquire and take Twitter private. Here with the latest is Ron Josie, senior city analyst in the sector. Good to see you, sir. So the metaphor du jour was from Thomas Hayes early in the show. He said this is the best thing that ever happened to Twitter. It was an old building with graffiti on it. He's going to fix that building up and wash the graffiti off. The canvas is yours. What's your reaction?
Well, you know, it's been easier said than done. And to do that in a private world is going to be a lot easier than doing it in the public world and dealing with folks like myself on a quarterly basis. Look, Twitter was very clear that their goal from a revenue and user perspective in 2023, that 7.5 billion, that 315 million MDAUs, that was their goal they were marching towards. They could get there in revenue, in our view, or at least close to it. On the DAU side, it was going to take some time. And with the change in CEO recently, with all the reorgs that we've had over the past several years, it's probably better to do that or at least easier to do that as a private company. So I guess I'd agree with that comment.
So then who's the big winner in this deal? A lot of people wondering about the profitability of Twitter, and Elon saying, look, it's not about the money, it's about the free speech. Who's really winning in this deal?
Well, you know, there's probably a few, but of course it's always TBD in terms of what happens longer term. I would tell you that the winners, well, shareholders would be one of them, right? Maybe Elon gets a chance to have further control over the product. You would hope that over time, if they can move their product to be more relevant with their onboarding getting better, which it has been more recently, that it can be a more relevant platform for users. And so therefore, at the end of the day, maybe in a few quarters, few years or what have you, then the users would ultimately win. But that's something that we'll see from a time perspective, because that's something that Twitter has been working on very hard. And it's still, they've got tremendous content. Searching and surfacing that content is something that's just something we've been looking for them to improve upon. And they were in a process to do that. Let's see if they can do that a little bit quicker.
If we look at this as a hub and spoke, with Elon being the hub, or even if we want to look at it as infinity rings, and now the social media ring is added on for Elon's hand at this point in time, moving forward, how does this round out the entire ecosystem that Elon has also looked across automotive the nature of automation broadly, and building a lot of those automotives, but from everything from connectivity to being able to launch things into space to now social media, you know, how does this all round out in the future?
Well, you know, and I'm not the expert in autos and certainly not the expert on space, but I would tell you from an internet perspective, it's not always a slam dunk. So, you know, growing an audience is the hardest thing. Keeping the audience there is even harder. And doing that so that people come back on a daily basis with new products and services is not easy to do when you've got massive competition, whether it be for time spent online, mind you, whether that be for Facebook or Meta, for that matter, for what Instagram's doing with Reels, maybe for TikTok, for Snap, you know, et cetera. And so doing things online, it's a highly competitive space, and the barriers to entry are not that great. Now, of course, once you get that scale, it's hard to lose it. And so, you know, managing an online business is very different than managing some of the other businesses that he's run. So we'll be very interested to see how that goes longer term for sure.
Yeah, and at that Twitter talk just about a week ago, he said this is not a way to make money. He's mentioned free speech. He's mentioned an edit button. How does he make money? And does it ultimately come through charging a subscription for Twitter?
You know, it'll be really interesting how advertisers react to whatever the new policies are, if there are new policies around free speech. I think that's point number one. With regards to a subscription basis or Twitter Blue, look, the more you put things behind a subscription wall, the less people will see it. And I think we've heard Twitter viewed as the Times Square and sort of unlimited, or at least let's broadcast out as much as you can. And so I'm not too sure if subscription's the way to go, except for maybe a subset of users who don't want to see ads. And so what will be fascinating is how much monetization will be a part of this. And my take would be initially not that much, meaning that let's fix Elon's probably first move is to make this product a little bit easier. Let's improve search. Let's improve the user experience. Let's really push on the product from an onboarding perspective, which Twitter's had some good progress here in the last few quarters. And so I bet that's going to be the focus for first and foremost, and then making money, or call it monetizing the audience, that will come in due time. But it'll be really interesting to see how advertisers view new leadership, or really what the change in policies might bring to the network.
And obviously, when you think about a company like TikTok, we've seen a lot of people sort of migrating off of Facebook, off of Instagram, and especially off of Twitter, and especially among younger people heading towards TikTok. How do you see Twitter positioning itself against the dominance of a TikTok?
Well, it's sort of different, right? No, I agree with you. And people only have so much time to spend online, and that's the media time spent. And, what TikTok's doing is nothing short of impressive, phenomenal in terms of user growth. What Facebook continues to do day in and day out to drive as many DAUs and monthly active people that they have is pretty wild. And the success of Reels here early days, and then even what Snap has done. And so it's a very competitive environment from an eyeball perspective, from a user perspective. And so, that's where the focus, that's why we think the focus will be more on the product side, which we've written about, and we're really trying to diversify and highlight why being on Twitter, being on that town square is helpful for you. But remember, Twitter is a one-to-many platform. I think Facebook and Instagram and such are one to some, one-to-one at some points, like a Snap or a TikTok. And so it all depends on the type of networks and the use cases. But for now, Twitter is going after a broader audience. And that's sort of the benefit of Twitter, as opposed to maybe what a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snap is.
Ron, perhaps a graduation point for yourself and other senior internet analysts out there who would no longer have to cover Twitter because it wouldn't be publicly traded anymore. And so with that in mind, even though you wouldn't have to cover it, who would you like to see installed as a CEO for a company in Twitter that is private?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, we'll be trying to monitor as many things as possible. Twitter still has tremendous scale from a user basis, tremendous scale from an advertising basis, primarily brand specific. So to be clear, look, I think the focus has to be on product, and so we know that when Jack stepped down here in fourth quarter and named Parag Agrawal as the new CEO, that was his background from a CTO perspective in tech, and so I think the focus will be on product. And if you can improve the product and keep driving that onboarding and keep users coming on